Hey there and welcome. Today in this video I wanted to go over my Jötunn build. It's kind of a mid-game build, around 2 to 300 million DPS. Having a lot of fun with the Jötunn class. I know there's a lot of players in softcore that are pushing extremely high wormholes. Hardcore, they're still pushing pretty high. I think there's a little bit of squishiness inside the Jötunn class that makes it a little bit of a struggle in hardcore. There's a lot of videos about endgame, heroic builds, angelic builds that are really strong. But there seems to be a lacking of early game and mid game builds, and I think that's one of the tougher parts for the Jötunn. Once you get that set class, you get strong enough to kind of farm out a little bit, and there's a couple parts that make it very quick. So having built-in teleportation is really nice. In this video, we're going to go over a little bit of skills, some of the gear that we have, upgrades that we can go, what kind of damage we can be looking at, and what mob levels we'll be able to farm fairly quickly and efficiently, versus what levels we can push towards. So for starters, this is the Jötunn class. Right here, we'll kind of go over the skills first. I think that's kind of more important. There's a couple different builds that are really good. Number one, I think our staples of the build, pretty much either way you go, is going to be permafrost and flash freeze. So both are huge stacking DPS ones. We'll have two debuffs on the target that'll amplify our damage done. It's kind of like a must-have. This isn't obviously a level 100 build, so over on the next side, we're going to take 1 point in Breath of Ice just so we can open up Orb of Frost, and then that's going to be our main damage spell. So we're going to max that out completely. As we continue down, Frozen Hide is nice. I put 1 point in it, especially if you have gear that gives you extra talent points. It's a really nice, basic all resistance. It's good for some defenses, especially if you have lower quality gear. It helps you get you into those contents a little bit easier without dying. Especially helpful in hardcore, but still helpful in softcore so you don't lose your relics. I do like putting 1 point on icicles. It's just a basic proc on any spells, so it's a little bit of added DPS. It's not significant, but it's well worth the 1 point. Again, especially if you have all talents on your gear. In my case, I'm looking at 6 points into it. I'm going to skip over Portal of Ice. That's your teleportation spell. It's really nice, but we'll go over that. Avatar of Frost, again, 1 point, all talents bringing it up. Super helpful, big damage increase for your gear. So definitely worth putting 1 point into. Now, to finalize on the left-hand tree, I like putting 1 point inside a Blizzard. I'll go over in detail why I don't use Avalanche, but the main reason is movement speed. I don't like the slowing factor that you get through Avalanche casts. Blizzard moves with you. It's a big damage increase. Normally, I would put more points into it, but for right now, I find this to be the most effective and efficient farming build for me. So over here on the right hand side, I don't take any poison glacier. We're not going to be doing a lot of auto attacks since most of our damage is going to come from Orb of Frost. We want to avoid staying in melee and dying from things, and also just most of our damage comes from this, so we're not going to be doing too much melee. We do take 1 point Frozen Boulder just so we can unlock Power of the Ancients. This one is super strong. Obviously increases any DPS that you have based on your maximum health and maximum mana. We're going to be doing a lot of health on this build, especially when we look down here at the embodiment, which gives us more max health, so this becomes a big damage increase, and so that's a must. I only use 10 points in it at the moment, just because I wanted to max out Permafrost and Flash Freeze. You could go 20 points into this and get the bigger increase onto it. I just didn't find it as necessary. It didn't do a significant increase in my DPS. It may vary depending on the build that you have, depending on how much max health and max mana you have. Glacial Armor, I love having 1 point in it. Obviously, we need it in this case because we're getting down here, but it's also nice to have just for projectile blocking. Archers seem to be a big damage point, especially when you go into damage breakpoints like Hell 4 or Hell 5. A lot of damage that can sneak up on you there. So anything that mitigates range damage, since a lot of us is going to be focused on range, is really good to have. 1 point Absolute Zero. It's another passive with a proc chance, which is really nice. This one breaks enemy cold resistance. Super important. All of our damage is based on cold. Kind of self-explanatory there. Sweep Attack. Again, we don't do a lot of auto attacking. We do some, so it's nice when it does proc. It's only there simply so that we can open up into the embodiment, but it is a nice little DPS chunk too. And then kind of the main staple of the Jötunn builds is the embodiment. This one obviously increases our cold damage, which is what all of our spells are based on. You can see it's about 100%. But it also increases our HP, which if we go back in here to the Power of the Ancients, we get additional damage based on that. So this is a huge portion of the build. So these are kind of the talent sections. I find that I can safely farm Hell 4 on this build, and I'll go into the gear later. But just to kind of touch bases on defensives here, I have about 185,000 reduction, 46% in my all resistance, 66 on physical and magic, and then obviously you can see cold and fire. I'd like to get my cold up higher. I may be specking runes for it later just to increase the damage based on the Avatar of Frost, which is important to have. So that's a DPS area that if you focused a little bit more on the cold and less on the physical gear, I just got unlucky with some of the gear that I have, that can help boost up your damage as well. Over here you can see that I have about 80,000 cold base damage from my gear, which is a good, again, it's good for health 3. That becomes a fairly efficient area to farm for health 3, and I find it to be a good spot. Other than that, mana per hit, not super important. Cooldown reduction, I personally think that getting this as high as possible is great. Really, lowers down the cooldown on the embodiment of, for our max health and damage, but also on our Frost Orb, which is already on a low cooldown, but obviously getting it lower is better for us. I just haven't spec'd into that yet with my gear. As I start getting a little bit better gear and some money, I'll look to improve that. Will probably be the next area that I look to improve. As we move into heroics, the things that I'm going to be looking for that I think are important are going to be elemental damage. We're going to switch from cold to elemental. We're going to move into a mana-based focus. Again, because Power of the Ancients is based on max health and max mana, we can do a mana stacking build here, which will help us with our damage increase, using items like Sovereignty, which obviously gives you additional damage based on max mana. Those are kind of the end game builds that we're looking towards. This guide is focused mostly on mid-game power spikes and what we can farm to get up to those later builds. Over here at hero level, I'm not going to cover this too much. Obviously, I don't have it maxed out yet. These are nice to have, and I think level 30 makes a really good breakpoint. So this is somewhere to shoot for when you're leveling up. It's a big damage increase for you. Obviously, in this case, I take 8% energy for the increased damage, 10% armor for the damage reduction. I find that Grasp of Life is the best for survivability. I don't have mana issues right now, so I don't need Astral Energy. You could potentially spec into the Grasp of Divinity, 1% in each. But again, when we're dealing with hardcore, I find Grasp of Life is very helpful. There's a couple of fire dots that do some significant damage. This really helps with keeping you above that limit. Over in the Merc, full defensive side, Armor Boost is great for reducing the damage that the Mercenary takes so that it survives longer, because we're doing damage mitigation here with Symbiosis. Shielding is absolutely essential. It's huge. You get a massive shield, which can really save you in some tight spots. And again, HP boost here is just to help the Mercenary stay alive. Replenish doesn't do a massive amount, but it's an easier place to put the talents. There's no really other good place to put it, so those are where I'm looking at for my Mercenary Talents. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look over into the gear side of things. Again, this is kind of a gear mid-game focus build. This is by no means, best in slot gear. The pieces that I have aren't the greatest pieces. They're not rolled out to the highest quality. But it gives you an idea of where you could look to get when you start getting that basic set together, and the damage that you could be doing, and where you could be farming. And then obviously where improvements can be made from there. So the first thing we'll look at is Ymir's Frozen Tears. Obviously that's a part of the staple build for the Jötunn. This one gives Orb of Frost increased speed, size, and damage. It's a little odd. I don't find the speed increase to be huge, or the size. The damage increase is definitely noticeable, so that part is huge. It seems that the orb lasts longer. The size is a little bit bigger on the main orb, but not enough that it becomes like a whole map clearing. Ymir's Frozen Shroud will be the headpiece that we're going to use. Obviously, a much better roll that you can get. Strength is useless for us in this case. It just happens to be the best piece that I could find at the time. Ymir's Frozen Vestment, crappy roll for mine. I only got 2 slots. You'd like to get 6. I do like the magic find on it. Really what we're looking for here is obviously we have cap out on energy. We have cold damage and cold damage here, so we have percent and base. These are huge, and some fairly good resistances as well. That's very helpful. 10% ability power, absolutely great. All of these you'll notice will have cold damage built into them, so that is where we get our cold damage stacking from. Over here we have Ymir's Frozen Boots. That finishes off our set, so we get our 4-piece bonus. That gives us the extra damage on Orb of Frost. Absolutely mandatory. Super helpful to have this set. From here, I find that the easiest and best weapon to get is the Crystal Cane of Ice. It's fairly easy to find, both on Auction House and just through regular drops. It's not super uncommon. It is a level 90 weapon. You can definitely get a better quality than I have. I have an 83%. The crit damage isn't huge. I don't find it to be super impactful. But it's basically a stat stick, right? So we're getting 20% cold damage plus 4,000 cold damage base, 20% ability power. Those are big numbers. That really helps. And if you're looking at a weapon and you don't have it, I would definitely search for it. It's very big. Obviously, you can go like a one-hander and shield route. There's nothing wrong with that. I just found this very easy to get, and it was a big DPS boost. So it's really something to look into. And again, it was fairly cheap to get. Frosty Hands, I'm not a huge fan of. Obviously, there's no energy baked into them. You can find better rolls. There can be green rolls with energy on them. It just happened to be the best that I had. It rolls cold damage. That's what I'm looking for. This is going to be the next piece that I'm looking to upgrade out. So keep that in mind. Obviously, I haven't upgraded it, maxed it out because of that reason. But it is, again, good for the cold damage. Gives us a little bit of that damage we're looking for. We get some resistances to it. Armor. I'm happy. Lich Sash I found to be very nice. Again, we're looking for that cold damage, and that's what we get here. So we're looking at 6% and 1100. I'm 8 out of 10. Definitely could be a better roll. There are better items out there. This is very nice, kind of easy to get, drops fairly often, sells fairly cheap. For a neck piece, Moonshard is probably not the greatest, so it's rolling magic damage, not cold damage. That hinders it a lot. There are like Witch's Claws, which I think are better. Those can roll cold damage. This just happened to be something that I had. I was able to get on the auction house fairly cheap. Max 10 out of 10. It gives me some decent energy. And again, because we deal extra damage based on the amount of energy or mana that we have, those two stats, the energy and percentage energy, those are really nice. Having the max mana is very helpful. So that's kind of the reason that I'm using it in this case. But otherwise, this is another piece that I'll be looking to replace as soon as I can. Over on the ring, Sanguine Bloodstone is nice just because we have 15% Magic Find, which I want to get kind of above a basic cap. I'm trying to get into that 500% range. That's where I find to be like a sweet spot, 550%. But other than that, we're looking at 854 energy, which is huge, and then some health and mana per second, which is really nice. +1 to all talents. Always good to have all talents. It's another item that I'm going to be looking to replace soon. So if you find something better with perhaps cold damage on it, high energy, high stam, all talents, things like that, definitely you could swap that out and get a little bit better DPS. But rings, are a little bit on the harder side to find, especially with the stats that we're looking for. Last but not least, we'll kind of go over the potion. A lot of different potions that you can use. When we're pushing in hardcore, I personally like the prismatic potion. So it's going to roll with all resistance plus max all resistance, which is really nice, getting us above kind of the basic cap that we have. It's fairly easy to upgrade and get those all resistances rolling. So you can see I get 31% from that across all of them. That's really huge. So I like using the prismatic. One thing to note, obviously, is the power on it. So it's not a health potion. We're not going to be restoring health from it, which can take a little bit of getting used to sometimes if you're relying on that. In this case, it just increases temporarily our max cap. What you'll find, and we'll go back to the resistances again, but some of the resistances are beyond my cap right now. And so when I hit this and I get that 6%, that will come into effect. And for those moments when you might take a little bit of damage, or you're a little bit worried, maybe you get walled in by a wall or you get stuck, this can be super helpful for that little bit of extra survivability. My reasoning typically behind not having a health potion is built into our kit is obviously a teleportation spell. So it's very easy to get in and out of sticky situations, but sometimes you need just that brief amount of resistance. And so I find that to be extremely helpful. So it's kind of a look at the gear. Again, we've already gone over the talents. We'll kind of just touch bases on the resistance again. You can see here that I'm at 66%, but I actually have 89%. So when I hit that potion, I will be able to have 72% here, because I've raised that cap, and I have the same thing for my magic resist. And you can see that I've just popped the potion. So that's nice, especially if I was to raise these resistances here. If I was to raise cold, obviously I'd get more damage as well. I just haven't gotten around to finding those pieces of gear yet. So that's kind of an overlook quickly of the gear that we're using. Again, this is very mid-focused. One thing to touch bases on is these levels. I will say that when you find a decent pair of gear, upgrade it. Don't be afraid to. It does cost quite a bit in rubies, but farming through Satanics and either selling them through auction house or straight to a vendor, you'll start to recoup that pretty quickly. And it is a massive increase both in reduction, so the ability to survive through armor, but then damage and health as well through stats. It's huge increases through that. That's going to be a huge place you can go from that early game set to really getting into mid game where you start pushing those higher numbers, is upgrading that gear. When that cold damage starts ranking in and you can start getting that And you can see here that I have maxed out 10 out of 10 here and here, as well as the weapon. So definitely don't be afraid to do that. Pick on your best piece of gear first, something that you don't think you're going to replace into. So some of the things to look for are obviously number of sockets that you have, right? What green roll that you had in here, what it rolled into addition. And then quality is a good place to look at it. It'll tell you how good that gear rolled compared to what it could roll, right? If you notice, mine's at 101. When you get a piece that's a quality 100 and you max it 10 out of 10, you can use a satanic dice. That satanic dice will roll it and give you a chance to upgrade the quality on it beyond that 100%. But it does also have the ability to reduce it and curse the item. So be very careful. But it is a way of kind of going beyond that, especially when you're starting to push towards end game, using heroics and things of that nature. But it is another area that you can look for just a little bit extra survivability or DPS to progress further. So here's a quick look. I'll kind of just do a quick reset on the DPS meter here, and I'm just moving back so that this orb doesn't hit the testing dummies. This is by no means the most accurate thing. The DPS meter isn't always accurate, but what it is good is when you're making changes to see kind of what changes have been made to your DPS. So okay, I made this talent change, this gear change, what have I made? And you'll see that just as we go into here, we start off pretty low. We're getting these buff stacks up, so we're sitting at about 100 million right now, and we are inside of Hell 3, and we're about 150 now, 160, 170. We'll get up to about the 200k mark. If your burst goes through well and you get a bunch of your snacks up early, it can go as high as 300. Again, this is not end all be all. Don't take this and go, okay, I'm guaranteed to do this much damage. It'll translate to doing that to a boss. This is kind of AoE damage here with 5 dummies. But it is really nice to, okay, I'm going to make a change. What affected it? And there's kind of 2 ways that you can check to see what effect your changes are making, right? So let's say you put on another piece of magic damage or elemental damage gear. If you mouse over your spell, you'll see it says cold damage, right? It'll tell you what bonus damage you're getting through the energy. In this case, I'm getting 21,000 extra, but my cold damage is 529. If I was to put something on, let's say that took away some energy based that I had, right? So here's a ring that has no energy, no cold damage, nothing. So right now we're at 529. We'll call it 530,000. I come over here, I put this ring on, and you'll see we're down to 490. So that cold, the energy on that ring makes a big difference because there is no cold damage on this, right? So, obviously, a little bit of upgrades can go a long way, and that's why upgrading your gear, beyond what it currently is. So level right down here where it says max. If you had a 1 out of 10 in your upgrade, you can start to expect some significant increases. We'll go ahead and take this into a quick wormhole. It's not going to be a super high level wormhole. It's just to give you an idea of kind of how the build rolls out, how we can move around, spells, and kind of the damage that we can expect through it. And just briefly, we'll go over the spells real fast. This is our teleportation spell, so we can use this to kind of move in and out. Helps us, move through the maps very quickly, but also get out of sticky situations. Orb of Frost, obviously, being able to transform and increase our HP, and then our Blizzard spell that follows around with us. We can go over relics as well. This is fairly standard. There's a couple things in here that obviously have no business being in here. I'll be resetting relics at some point as well. But for the most part, I would say 90% of these relics are definite must-haves and really increase the damage that you're looking at. So Magic Mushrooms is huge. It's +1 to all talents. Self-explanatory. Want to get that. Being in hardcore, and again, because the Jötunn stacks damage based on max health, stamina percents are great. So Cake is a good one. Odd Book of Spells, 3% energy. Obviously, we scale for energy, so that's really strong. Holy Bible, 5%. Titan's Gladius, it's not necessary. That's one of the relics I'm looking to get rid of. Damned Buckler, 4% armor. Armor for reduction, survivability, super nice to have. Silver Cube and Golden Cube are just stats to every one. That's really nice. Golden Dagger is great, 4% energy. Silver Ring, 3% stam. Again, you'll see a theme here, right? We're looking at stam stuff. So Cheeseburger and Triforce, basic armor for some survivability. Bonsai Tree is a staple in a lot of builds, just 3% flat. The Holy Grail, 2 to all talents, is really strong. Monkey King Bar, this is probably one I would drop. I don't think that speed is as important. As we start getting better boots and things, we get inherent speed. With our teleportation, we're pretty quick already. So this is definitely a spot that we could open up for a better relic. Personally, I love Horn Mask. Friend with demons. Anytime you have a demon shrine, you have a chance at getting a negative debuff or a very strong positive buff. With this, it'll always be positive. Do note that if you're running with friends, in co-op runs that don't run this, you still have a chance at getting negative buffs, but if you're doing solo runs, or if your friends have them as well, you're always guaranteed that positive buff. Mario's Pipe is not the most ideal since we already have a built-in teleportation, but it is nice for a little bit speed run. Ultimately, I would trade this out for Book of Belial for the 25% damage increase, or just not at all and get a random stat relic. But it was something I found and it was nice to have in the meantime. Amazon Spear, same thing, right? We're not doing a lot of attack speed or speed, so I don't recommend getting Amazon Spear. Old Man's Coffee Cup, I like for the energy. Bonus for the attack speed. We don't use it a lot, but it's not bad to have. Damien's Left Eye is just a huge amount of energy. Mage's Handbook, same thing. Old Runestone. Lost Wand is up for debate. Obviously, we don't need the attack speed, but the stamina and energy are nice. I look at it as a 3% gain, so I think it's a very good relic to have, but you know, something that you could choose to leave or take. Phoenix Feather is great. Speed's not as important, but it's nice to have, but the 2% energy is great. Newt's Tail, same thing, but in reverse. 5 stam, 1% energy is awesome. Daze Rune is kind of weak, but 2% energy is 2% energy. Arcane Boots are a must. This gives you flying, and this is the flying item you want, plus the 5% energy. So this will let you fly over water, make you immune to certain traps, so super, super important. And then Mantle of Arthas, 4% armor, 4% stam, survivability, and a little bit of extra damage. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just open up a quick wormhole. Right, so you'll see it's just a level 7, it's super basic. This is by no means a stretch or a test. But we can kind of just go right through here. And you'll see that with the teleportation, you know, we can just kind of hop around, which is really nice. And if there were any wallers in here, which doesn't appear that there's going to be, but we'd be able to just move around fairly quickly and get out of those. And you can see that, you know, our auto attacks really do nothing. The Blizzard is nice because it does do a bunch of damage, and so it's just really good at clearing a little bit of extra stuff. But 99% of our damage is coming through our Orb of Frost right there, right? That's where most of our damage is going to come from. So we're just going to continue to do a quick run through here. And you can just, you know, pretty much walk through, nice teleport through. And then, so there's a good example of Waller, you know, we can just go over if we had gotten blocked. Super nice. And then boss. You see 47 million. It's not again, it's not a ton of health, but fairly easy to get. And then we just collect our loot and we're out. So that's it, guys. You know, if you have any questions, any comments, anything that you think would be better in the build, feel free to leave in the comments. I'd love to see it. I do respond to all the comments. Again, the purpose of this was really just to look at a mid-game build. It's certainly by no means an end-game build. It's not going to be good for Hell 5. It's not going to get you into Ubers or, you know, big dungeons. But it is great for Hell 3, getting that quick farm in. It's a cheap build to start out with, and it's a great way to work towards your end-game heroic builds. There will be a video that I do coming up when I look into the heroic builds. So we're going to be using Sovereignty, Mirage, on a good shield, bring up our defenses. Definitely a lot of places and specific pieces of gear that we can look at and where we can farm them. But this, again, is just a very basic, you know, how to get started into that mid-game build. Thank you. Have a good one.